Hey everyone, welcome to the Armchair Fantasy Football Podcast. Welcome back, I should say. We are the one and only working class podcast, and we are the Blue Collar Ballers. There's two of us today, not three. John, I'm here. I'm DJ, by the way. I'm back in full effect with my original OG partner, John Sir Royce. He's here as well. Tom does have the night off. John, he's got some prior commitments to deal with. But you're still here on the Fantasy Football Podcast by regular guys, which is us, for regular guys, which is us, and for the listeners as well, and the viewers on YouTube also. Our beautiful, handsome, devilishly good looks are back in front of the listeners, all those guys out there that like to check us out, which is fine, you know. And some ladies out there too. We mix it up. We do not discriminate. I don't care if a goat's watching this show, as long as they're liking and subscribing, frankly. That's where it's at for me. So how you been, John? It's been a while since we've been in the chairs here.
Good, actually. Work's a little different this week. I'm on a night schedule, so I'm up all night, and I sleep during the day. That's just this week, so I just got to get used to that sleep pattern, and then everything's back to normal.
I just drooled beer all over myself.
Other than that...
Well, my first one, too, so you think it'd be...
Everything's been good, though.
Yeah. How was football this weekend for you? Did you get some games, some playoff games in?
I watched a few.
Any surprises for you?
Yeah, Cleveland pulled off the upset.
I've been hearing a lot of Cleveland rocks this week.
Yeah, I was also surprised.
Well, Cleveland's going to pass away next week, so I hope they're enjoying it. Yeah.
The Colts almost pulled off an upset. I had them predicted to beat Buffalo, and they just barely lost. But predictions-wise, I went 3-1 in the games I picked.
Nice. So we do a playoff challenge. Some of us are too afraid to do it. And I didn't fare too well, John. I lost a lot of men out there on the battlefield this week. I got 3 guys left, and 2 of them played this week. So one of them's, not Mahomes. One of them's Devonte Adams, the pimp of the nation, so nothing wrong with that. Another one's Le'Veon Bell, and then the third one is Chris Godwin, who actually succeeded this week and moved on to next week. Everybody else died on the battlefield for me, so I'm going to need a miracle to pull it off, and that's part of the fun. You just never know what's going to happen. You know, and the guys that got Cleveland players, which was pretty late, by the way, because nobody wanted them, are paying off because of it. So that's very interesting. Try it out in your leagues. If you get done with the season and you're like, I'm not ready to quit you yet, and then you can do the playoff challenge and get a little bit more fantasy football out of it, right, John?
Oh, yeah.
Well, not John, because he's too much of a chicken.
I didn't do it this year. I've done it in the past, but this year
I even told him I said, I'll spot you the money, and if you win, I'll take half the winnings. And he must have been playing at Sir Royce, as we referred to it here. So he doesn't remember hearing that. Be that as it may, I wish you would have, because now I would have felt like at least I had a chance. But the thrill is gone, or at least it seems.
I probably would have picked too many Colts players. Look what happened with that.
All right, so we're talking about top 12 quarterbacks today, right?
Correct.
And then the next show, we're going to talk about top 24 receivers. I don't want to lead the listeners and viewers astray, though. We're going to discuss in detail the top 12, and then we're just kind of list the 13 through 24. Thank you for saving me there. But before we do that list, we got another list we have to go to. It is the return, John, of top 5 news. Give me a little news music there. That sounds like a chicken doing the news. I don't know what that was, but
it's supposed to be like a news alert.
Yeah.
That's
I'm still gonna come up with that. Yeah, you sounded like a chicken that was getting violated, so that's okay.
Still on the spot.
Yeah, well, that's what I do because it gives us laughs. So, number 5, top 5 news: Joe Burrow is to resume throwing starting mid-February. John, I don't know, where do you think that puts his timeline for the start of the season? Is he going to be good to go? Based on the report from Roto World, and more specifically ESPN, sorry, I stumbled there. Joe Burrow, ACL, hopes to resume throwing in mid-February. That would have Burrow 12 weeks removed from going under the knife. Quote, that's kind of when the next phase of rehab will start, Burrow said Tuesday. The quarterback believes he is already through most of the difficult portion of his rehab. Quote, it's all kind of downhill from here. There's a lot of milestones to hit and a long road ahead. Setbacks are always possible, but it looks like Burrow should be ready for Week 1, 2021. I know my son Andrew, who's a big Cincinnati Bengals fan, I was excited to hear that, and I'm sure his fantasy owners were excited to hear that as well.
I think he's going to be fine. The only setback, I think, unless he has any medical setbacks, the biggest setback he'll have is going to be the mental challenge in his head. Wondering if the knee's going to hold up. Because a lot of players after ACL, MCL surgery, usually it's a mental thing in their head.
Burrow looked fine year one. And he didn't look like that can't-miss prospect that we heard about, but everybody transitions differently, John. And we could see Herbert take a big step back this year and Burrow take a big step forward. As a matter of fact, that's how I would assume it's going to play out. I don't know about you.
It depends on the who takes over the head coaching vacancy in LA Chargers. And as for Cincinnati, they just need to surround Burrow with some better protection on that line.
You don't know, yes. So, yeah. Andrew, he's the off-camera guy here. What position would you pick in the first round of the draft this year for the Bengals?
That's kind of a tough one because we pick 5th overall, and goes through my head. Offensive line is obviously probably the biggest.
So there you go.
Yes.
You didn't have to take that long to get there, but well done. Offensive line. The kid's smart. He knows what he's talking about. And why is it the offensive line?
Because if Burrow goes down again, I mean, that's the season.
You got one heck of an asset there in the number 1 overall pick, a guy that you're going to probably end up paying kabillions of dollars. You might want to protect him. So hopefully,
and look what the Colts did when Andrew Luck was drafted a few years after they concentrated on that offensive line, and it paid off for him. In his stats and numbers, he became a better quarterback with the protection. So I think the same thing can be said with Burrow. He's got the receiver weapons. He just needs that protection to give a little bit longer to throw and make accurate throws.
Absolutely. So next on the list, number 4, the Jaguars are still waiting on Urban Meyer in their search. Well, it looks like they found the coach that they want, John, but in their search for a new head coach over there in Jacksonville. NFL Network's Mike Garofalo reports the Jaguars are, quote, still waiting on ex-Ohio State coach Urban Meyer. 56-year-old Meyer is waffling on whether to take a crack at the big leagues, but he has seemed to be the Jags man from the second they fired Doug Marrone, probably before that too, John. It would be a high-risk, high-reward gamble for Jacksonville. Meyer lacks even position coach experience at the NFL level and would run extremely hot at his college stops before burning out and leaving early. So he was kind of a Harbaugh. Which one's the one that was in San Francisco? I always get those guys mixed up.
Jim.
John?
No, John. Jim was in.
So Jim, yeah, it's a Jim Harbaugh type of situation where the guy burns bright and then flames out really fast. So that's kind of what Meyer's done in college. And again, that's Mike Garofalo on Twitter. What do you think of Urban Meyer? Is he going to move the needle finally in Jacksonville? Does it matter when Trevor Lawrence is your quarterback? Is it going to move anyway with him?
It's all. The biggest thing with Urban Meyer is never played at the pro level. We know what he's done in college, but it's also it's not a huge sample size. Very successful at Florida, very successful at Ohio State. The question is, can he manage that pro level and make those steps? And the biggest thing, he's taken over a team, an organization that has a lot of work to do on both sides of the ball. So he's going to have his work cut out for him if he takes this. And the biggest question is how successful he's going to be year one. I think it's going to take a couple of years to rebuild this program, not just year one.
Well, Trevor Lawrence is going to be a huge help, and let's face it, he is a bigger prospect than Joe Burrow was, and certainly a bigger prospect than some of the schmucks that were drafted number 1 overall in previous years. Baker Mayfield looking at you, although he is advanced in the playoffs, so good on you on that. But I mean, these are different quarterbacks. It's such a level up to Burrow in his prospects, I guess, and then it's an even bigger jump to Lawrence. So a guy that's coming out of college and a kid that's coming out of college, I don't know if that's such a good combination. You know what I mean?
And does Urban Meyer shock the world and take Justin Fields over Lawrence?
I don't think that's gonna happen.
I don't think so either, but you never know. You can trade down. We don't until Urban Meyer takes over this team. There's a lot of what ifs, but right now it's trending towards the Jags want him, and they're even going to pay the asking price. If you haven't heard, it's $12 million a year. He's demanding and
just peanuts really for some of these guys.
And he's wants his own coaching staff. Obviously, he's not hiring all the coaches and stuff there, but I'm interested to see how he does in the NFL. Because some coaches,
if he makes it there, if he goes there.
So some coaches don't do well in the NFL. We'll see.
Speaking of guys we're interested in seeing how they do in the NFL, at number 3 is Devonta Smith. Puts up 12 catches, 215 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Pretty good, right, John?
Yeah, and that was
In the first half. That was just in the first half, en route to Alabama victory. This kid looked great. I mean, what number prospect is he for you, John, coming out of college at the wide receiver position, number 1, and number 2? Are you concerned about 6'1", 175? That's even smaller than Jerry Jeudy, who still isn't really an NFL-sized wide receiver.
Devonte Smith may be probably the highest prospect wide receiver probably since Julio Jones to come out. That's how good his...
175 is only a touch heavier than Hollywood Brown, though.
Yeah, but he did also win the Heisman. The kid is just a dynamic player. The only thing that concerns me, I do agree with
I don't know if the Heisman is the yardstick for NFL
No, I
success,
get that, but it's just his catch.
But he is a wide receiver that won the Heisman, which is no.
Yeah, and let's also remember that Alabama is a wide receiver factory. This team is produced.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, they produce
well,
wide
think about the
receivers
guys.
every
Julio
year.
Jones, Amari Cooper, Jerry
Jeudy.
Jeudy looks like he's going to be doing
Calvin
a fine
Ridley.
job. Calvin Ridley's another one, yeah.
So I would lean more towards he's going to be a top 5 pick in this draft. The question is exactly where he goes, because you may see a team just surprise you. Could be like a team like Cincinnati. I don't think they need the wide receiver, but they can throw for him.
And Andrew said that too. They don't need wide receivers, but they need offensive line. So Cincinnati does anything other than offensive line, they're darn fools. But there's a lot of teams I could see this kid landing on, like a Calvin Ridley, who was a bigger player, but Calvin Ridley wasn't that stud prototype like Julio, but he fit right in and learned the NFL way of life with Julio there. A landing spot like that, I think, would be more natural and make more sense. Corey Davis moves on from Tennessee. I think Tennessee would be a great landing spot for him on the other side of the field of A.J. Brown. So a situation like that, I think, would be ideal.
And the other part, too, is you don't know if a team like Atlanta, they could trade a Julio in the offseason and draft a Devonta Smith, who better than have another Alabama receiver there to take over Julio. But there's been a lot of speculation about Julio being traded in the offseason, so with Matt Ryan. There's a lot of what ifs. I can't wait to see where this kid goes and what team he plays for. But the question is, the landing spot is going to determine how good of a prospect he's going to be year 1. Look at Justin Jefferson, just the perfect team he landed on. He got the starting job. I think the same could be said about Devonta Smith. He's that polished of a player.
Yeah. Number 2 on our list of top 5 news, Doug Peterson fired from the Philadelphia head coaching position. It sounded like they weren't going to move on from Peterson. And then they did. So here we are. What does this mean for Jalen Hurts is my biggest question, because obviously Peterson probably made, and maybe he didn't. Maybe that's the story here. But presumably Peterson made the call to get Hurts out there for the last 3-4 games. My thought was that was an effort to save his job. Maybe it was from above getting down on the headset and saying, it's Hurts' time now. Sit Wentz. Maybe it was something he was instructed to do.
Yeah,
now that we see what happened.
We don't know the whole what's behind the curtains and stuff, and he could have been pushed by the organization to start Hurts. Wentz has not looked good this year. He's had every opportunity to take that job and keep that job, and I don't know if this was a Peterson decision or not, but starting Jalen Hurts actually gave that team a big boost near the end. And I think they're just, I think Peterson leaving that team is actually be better in the long run, but it leaves a lot of what-if factors. Does the next coach come in? Does Zach Ertz leave this team? Exactly what's going to happen here and what it does to the team. But if you're the organization, Hurts is your future, not Wentz. The only problem with Wentz now is how do they get rid of that big contract without taking a huge salary cap hit?
Right. It'd be interesting to see what happens with Hurts. I think Hurts is the guy there, and I think the probably best bet is to try to trade Wentz, And maybe New England is a good fit for Wentz. Maybe, Indianapolis got into the playoffs and got bounced in the first round. Does Wentz get them further? I don't know the answer to that. And I guess the answer probably is no. But it's something to keep an eye on, for sure. Deshaun Watson, trade rumors. We kind of touched on it on the last episode, John. This episode, we're hearing Texans CAO Cal McNair. He said he hasn't heard from Deshaun Watson and hopes to speak with him soon. This is from Sarah Barshop on Twitter. It'd be cool if it was Bar Stools, but I guess not. So That was a lame dad joke. Anyway, I've come to understand, quote, I've come to understand that it's been reported that Deshaun feels left out of the process, but he and I have had several visits and understood his point of view before meeting with candidates. This was McNair. I've reached out to Deshaun about Nick's hire, and I look forward to him getting back to me when he returns from his vacation. But isn't that a hire that's already been made?
Yes.
What do you think about this guy I just hired? That doesn't really seem inclusive. And then there's more to it, John. ESPN's Chris Mortensen reports that Texans quarterback Deshaun Watson is, quote, still angry about the team's insensitivity to social justice. Moore added that Watson's anger over the team's insensitivity to social justice issues includes their hiring practices and not even giving Chiefs offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy an interview. I would tend to agree with that, man. Like, I feel like Bieniemy needs a job this year, and that's to me not a race thing. That's a best man for the job thing, and I don't see how it's not Eric Bieniemy at this point of what he's done. Granted, he does have the undeniable Kavorka of Pat Mahomes. I get that, but he's still done a remarkable job with also ran wide receivers. Anybody not named Tyreek Hill is really, they're okay receivers, and these are household names because of Pat Mahomes and Eric Bieniemy. If it's me, and my quarterback's Deshaun Watson, he says, I want this guy, I either give him that guy, this is just me, or I trade Deshaun Watson.
Right now, all signs are pointing to, I don't know
him fighting his way out of there.
Yeah.
And I don't blame him at all. By the way.
Watson wanted to be a part of the decision making, and like he didn't want the final decision, but he wanted to have a say. Then he went right over his head and said, "Oh yeah, we're gonna make part of the process." Then they go and they hire Nick, this GM, without even consulting with him. So I can see why Deshaun's mad. He wants to be part of this future, this organization. And what made him mad last year is when they traded DeAndre Hopkins.
This is coming off the heels of a year that he traded their best player.
And I agree with Deshaun Watson. He wants to be their franchise quarterback.
Totally agree with him.
But when you start trading assets without getting with your quarterback...
So not only have you traded Hopkins, but you don't have a first-round pick this year. You got a guy, Laramie Tunsil's, that's not holding up his end of the bargain in terms of protecting Deshaun Watson. Watson has every reason to fight his way out of Houston. And I'm not, gone are the days, man, where that's your team and you need... No. You hold your end of the bargain up by performing on the field, and that's exactly what Deshaun Watson does week in and week out. The people that aren't holding up their end of the bargain are the Houston Texans. And they need to trade him. Simple as that. They need to trade him, and guess what? It'll work out for them. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. Tua, the two first-round picks and 2 second-round picks. Miami's not really losing anything.
No, they're giving back their picks.
Right.
Yeah, they make the...
And they're getting Deshaun Watson, which might be the missing link on that team. Other teams like, Chicago could be another team. I don't know that they have the assets Miami does. It seems like Miami's the smartest trade partner. But Houston, are they going to dig their heels in on a guy that doesn't want to be there? And they're not going to win anyway? Or are they going to rebuild and send that guy somewhere else where he can be successful so you're doing right by him and you're giving yourself a chance to compete in the next 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, Bill O'Brien destroyed this team.
Oh, God, horrible.
Destroyed this team.
And they literally let him in to the organization so he could tear it apart and let him... He was like, for lack of a better word, John, a virus.
And look at
or even worse, a parasite.
Look at J.J. Watt. He wants out of Houston. So where does that
start? J.J. Watt says to Deshaun Watson, I'm sorry I wasted one of your prime years. Not I, but we, the team. And, I don't know. It's just a crap situation.
Yeah, the whole organization just needs to be revamped, and hopefully this new GM can do that. But leaving Deshaun Watson, who's supposed to be your franchise quarterback of the future, with no say.
Yeah.
And I can see why I stand right by Watson. I can see why he's offended, and at this point, why not just please the player and trade him, and you can get a lot of your picks back. Like you said, Miami's a perfect team. It's a win-win for them. You have other teams like San Fran. Are they going to roll with Jimmy G, or Deshaun Watson goes there? It can be God.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of.
They can cut Jimmy G and only lose like $2 million in cap. So that's probably what they're going to do.
And Shanahan with a Watson? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I don't think he's ever had a quarterback like that.
Yeah, for sure. All right, speaking of quarterbacks, let's get into the top 12 quarterbacks coming out of our wonderful 2020 season, John. I racked up a lot of gold, though. I'm still waiting for that one belt, Aaron Ryan. You know, get off your rear end, dude. I'm the champ. Don't you know I'm the late champion? Come on, jeez.
And the Triple Crown's not even here yet. It's on its way, though.
It's coming, though. Well, that's going to be glorious, let me tell you. Oh, she fine. Anyway, starting with number 12 on the list, John, is Matt Ryan, a guy that always seems to manage to find his way into the QB1 mix, but not always. Matter of fact, it's almost like every other year he doesn't manage to do it. So these are his finishes the last several years. 7th, 15th, 7th, 19th, 2nd, 15th, 2nd, 11th, and now 12th in 2020. With those quarterback finishes, it kind of seemed like Matt Ryan was awesome every other season, John, right up until the last 2 seasons where he settled into what I would consider solid range. So let's take into consideration that Ryan played just 9 games with Julio Jones. In those 9 games, Ryan averaged 19.05 points per game. And in the games without Julio, Matty Ice averaged just 13.93. That's a huge drop. Matter of fact, that's a 26.9% drop.
That hurts.
There are rumors that Julio Jones may be traded, as you discussed earlier, John, which I guess would pretty much stand to reason that would be 16 games without his favorite target, Julio Jones, which could lead to the end of the Matt Ryan era as a QB1 as we know it. What's the future hold for Matty Ice?
Well, there's also trade talks about Matt Ryan being dealt as well. This organization, Arthur Blank just wants a win. And that's why,
Wasted a lot of good years and
Quinn's
a lot of
gone,
good talent,
yep.
man.
And ever since they lost that Super Bowl, they just haven't been the same. And here's the thing. Julio's getting older, but he's still good. He's still good. He was injury prone this year, but something that hasn't happened for a while. But Matt Ryan could be a guy that's gone. I mean, there's a lot of depth in this draft. People like Mac Jones. I mean, there's a ton of talent. Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence. I mean, Kyle Trask. There's so many quarterbacks in this draft that they could go after, and they have a decent pick here. Or do they sign possibly like a Fitzpatrick here and move on from Matt Ryan and his big contract? So it's going to be interesting how this goes. I know there's been talks of it, but Matt Ryan, maybe this is the year if he does stay with Atlanta, because it seems like every other year he gets back in those single digits. So maybe I'm on the Matt Ryan this year instead of last year.
Yeah, for me, my excitement level after this year kind of falls off a little bit for Matt Ryan. And I'm going to tell you right now, John, if Julio Jones is not in the mix, I'm not even looking at him. Unless last pick of the draft, ultimate late round quarterback. Because, we look at that 26% drop in difference when Julio's out there and when Matt Ryan's not. That tells me everything I need to know. Or when Julio, yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah, look at
when Julio's out there and when he's not.
Look how many 300-yard games he had last year, and that was Julio playing basically. I think he only missed like 1 game last year.
Right.
As this year, just look at the difference in how successful he was last year, having 10 or 11 300-yard games. As this year, I think he only had like 4 or 5.
Right.
So big difference without Julio on the field. Atlanta could probably surprise us though too. Maybe they sign a free agent, Allen Robinson there, and let Julio go, and it maybe Ridley takes over that more dynamic play, whereas Robinson's that possession receiver.
The one thing about Atlanta, though, and you got to give them credit, they've always done a really nice job of drafting receivers.
Yes.
I think pretty much all of their talent is homegrown. Even Russell Gage, I believe, was drafted by them. So I'd be surprised if they didn't try to continue to go that route. And Julio is under contract.
Yes.
It's just trade talks. So
Just speculate.
we'll assume right now that he's in Atlanta, and if he is, I'm interested. If he's not, you got to get an Allen Robinson type of guy to sell me on Matty Ice next year. All right, moving up the list to number 11. Kirk Cousins, John, lands at number 11. Kind of the quarterback everyone loves to hate, especially me. Cousins, I kind of look at him as a gymnast, John. You know why? Because this game is all about splits. I looked into this. At US Bank Stadium, Kirk Cousins averages 283 yards and 2.75 passing touchdowns per game. Outside of his home stadium, he averaged 249 yards and 1.63 passing touchdowns per game. So about 40 less yards and chopped the touchdowns in half in his away games. That's a huge difference. Cousins played just 5 teams also, John, that were top 15 against quarterbacks. Packers, Saints, Bears, Bucks, Colts. In those games, against those teams, he averaged 15.5 points per game. You ready for this? You want to talk about inflating stats? Cousins played against 8 teams with bottom 15 defenses: Detroit, Atlanta, Dallas, Tennessee, Seattle, Carolina, Jacksonville, and Houston. All those teams in 1 year, bottom 15 defenses. Against those teams, he averaged 21.98, John. That's a ridiculous 41.8% increase from those top 15 defenses to the bottom ones. I can see a difference, and I expect a difference, but that's outrageous. On top of that, Cousins, to me, is kind of a front-running bottom feeder. He's also fortunate to have top 3 running back and 2 top 10 wide receivers. Injuries to those players or a tougher schedule is going to mean curtains for Cousins in 2021, especially with that 26th ranked offensive line. What's your take on Kirk Cousins?
Cousins.
And does that make any sense to you?
No, it makes perfect sense. No, Cousins was rewarded with, like you said, an easy schedule this year. So the question is going to be interesting when the NFL schedule.
And when he faced tough teams, it was not good for him.
Yeah, I mean, look at the division. Green Bay plays twice, plays Chicago twice, and plays Detroit twice.
Yeah.
Out of all those, Detroit's probably the best, easiest matchup for them.
Oh, by far.
So that helps every year. But the question is, Green Bay's always pretty much racing for the playoffs.
Yep.
And then the Bears still a top defense unless anything changes. So he's still going to face them. So the question is going to be is, what improvements are they going to make for this offensive line? And if this defense improves in any way, it could hinder this offense going forward as well. That's the thing. So a lot of times they were playing from behind and throwing a lot. So the question is, are a better defense next year? Do they stay more competitive? Do they run the ball more? They run the ball quite a bit, but they threw a lot more this year than they did the year before.
Kirk Cousins, this is how I measure Kirk Cousins moving forward. He's a streaming quarterback that you can play in great matchups and fade in tough matchups. I think that's pretty accurate.
It's very accurate. I mean, look at the year before, same thing. He did better even then he imploded on some easy matchups, but it's hard to trust this offense right now.
All right, moving on to number 10, Lamar Jackson of the Baltimore Ravens. John, while Lamar did suffer a decline from 2019 to 2020, he still had a heck of a year. And not only that, but he didn't see much of a drop in efficiency. It was more in terms of usage in overall throws and runs and stuff like that. So take the following into consideration. His yards per completion went from 7.8 in 2019 to 7.3 in 2020. Not bad. His rushing TDs stayed right at 7 both years. His yards per rush went from 6.9 to 6.3.
Still good.
Right there.
Very good.
Rushing yards did go from 1,206 in 2019 to 1,005 in 2020, but he still managed over 1,000 yards rushing as a quarterback, which is incredible. And none of those are really big, significant drops. The biggest drop, John, this is what Tom kind of alluded to, was the drop in touchdown percentage, which went from 8.9 to 10.74. Reverse that. It went from 10.74 to 8.9 this season. However, there is more to this. It was apparent to most of us that Baltimore was trying to reinvent their offense, which came at the expense, honestly, of Lamar Jackson, the way I saw it. In September and October, Lamar Jackson saw a touchdown percentage of 6.17%. And in the last half of the season, Jackson's touchdown percentage went up to 7.7%. It was ascending. In addition to that, Lamar Jackson rushed for just 2 touchdowns in the first 2 months of the season, John, and 5 in the last 2. Harbaugh needs to build this offense around the strengths of Lamar Jackson all season. And he didn't do that this year. In 2021, he's going to need to do that. And if he does, he's going to be right back in the top 5, in my opinion, is Lamar Jackson.
Lamar Jackson, I think, is just... He's got Mark Andrews. Dobbins is the future running back there. Ingram will probably be released this offseason, leaving Dobbins, Gus Edwards, and Justice Hill to take over that backfield. I don't see him going for a running back here. They have the running backs, which I think the only thing Jackson's missing is just one more receiver. Hollywood Brown is... I know he started off
Dez did a
slow,
nice job this year.
and he did great. And the question is, Dez didn't do bad.
He did a nice job, yeah.
But the question is, you also got to think is Dez is going to be, 34, I think?
This could be an Allen Robinson landing spot. This is the place I'm thinking Allen Robinson, yeah.
And I think if they get him that one more receiver, this could put him over and right back into the top 5 again.
Allen Robinson and Hollywood Brown is a lethal combination.
You have that deep threat, but you have that possession receiver that can also get
deep too. Yeah, for sure. So outlook on Lamar Jackson, pretty good for 2020.
Yes, top 5. I think he gets right back into that.
All right, moving on to number 9, Justin Herbert. 59% of Justin Herbert owners made it to the playoffs. Why? Because Justin Herbert was undrafted. When you grab a guy as a late round flyer, or even better, as a waiver wire ad, you have the chance to build a better team. That's what a lot of people did this year. And that's why, frankly, we often advocate for late round quarterback. And Herbert really, John, is the poster child for that very strategy. And let's not also overlook the significance of Herbert finishing in the top 10 after not having started in the first game. So he missed a game. Herbert was on a 16-game pace of 355.2 points, which would have been good for a QB8 finish. Remember that number. 2 glaring issues for Herbert were as follows. And kind of bear with me on this first one. I went through all the games dissecting Herbert's first half totals and his second half totals, meaning quarter 1 and quarter 2, and quarter 3 and quarter 4. I spread out each of them over 4 quarters, and then I calculated what his points per game would have been. If we take the numbers that Herbert posted in the second half of each game, he would have finished the season with 307.4 fantasy points. Taking the numbers from the first half of gameplay through 2020, Herbert would have finished with 446.8 points, which would have been a number 1 QB overall finish by a mile.
Wow.
That's how bad his splits were from the first half and the second half. The other issue with Herbert was his split between his first 7 games and his last 8 games. 24.34 points per game in his first 7 and 20.3 in his last 8. That may not seem like much, but it's a difference between a QB12 finish and a QB7 finish. The question here for me, John, with a new offense, but a presumably full offseason, which version of this apparent Jekyll and Hyde quarterback should we expect in 2021? Which Justin Herbert is the real Slim Shady here?
The question, I think the biggest question here is, it's not so much Herbert, it's what coach is going to take over this team. An Eric Bieniemy from the Kansas City taking over this team could make Herbert a top 5, a top 3, because the way the offense is run. Look what he did for Patrick Mahomes.
Right.
You bring that mindset there, and it's like I said to you, when Austin Eckler came back, look at Herbert's numbers drop. Like, he's still throwing the pass attempts, but there's shorter throws, you know what I'm saying,
right.
Shorter completion per average, as where when Eckler was out, he was making those deep throws and taking those shots. And I'm not saying he didn't take those shots all the time, but it seemed that those opportunities were a lot less when Eckler came back. So the biggest question here is going to be which coach takes over this organization and what they do with him here. Because if they a coach that runs the ball quite a bit comes here, it could hurt Herbert, where, you know, you see if Herbert is meant to throw the deep ball. So it's just going to be a matter of what coach, but he has every opportunity as the receivers. May not have a Hunter Henry depending on free agency, but he still has all the weapons there in place to have a good season.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's move on to number 8. Tom Brady lands at number 8. The ageless Tom Brady saw similar narratives play out the last few seasons in New England, John. In 2017, Brady averaged 18.5 points per game, but just 14.05 in the last 4 weeks. In 2018, Brady averaged 17.5 points per game, 17.7 in the last 4 weeks, but 5.04 championship week.
Ugh.
Not good. In 2019, Brady averaged 16.5 points per game, and in the last 4 weeks, another dip, 13.94. And then Tom Brady saw a fresh start in 2020 with Tampa. The results of that, John? As a Buccaneer, Brady averaged 21.1 points per game, and in the last 4 weeks, Tom Terrific averaged even more than that, 24.8. He went up, unlike every year in New England, which is remarkable for a guy his age, especially considering that he might be getting better. One last thing that I want to touch on here is the narrative that this is only because of the Tampa Bay offense that's so loaded. Wasn't this the same Tampa offense that saw Jameis Winston throw 10 less touchdowns and 18 more interceptions than Brady in 2019? Or maybe it's the same loaded offense that just mustered 7 wins last season compared to the Bucs' 11 wins here in 2020. To suggest that it's the players responsible for Brady's success honestly, John, is uninformed and ignorant. It's TB12 that turned TB7 into TB11, meaning their wins, in their first playoff appearance since 2007. And I, for one, John, loved every minute of it.
Tom Brady, so when Brady went to the Bucs, as a Pats fan it hurts, but now you have to say it. Brady is the reason we were successful in New England all those years. Not Belichick. It was Brady. Now we see it clear as day. I know it's only been one season. A lot of people are like, oh, so you're already saying it's Brady, it's not Belichick. Well, guess what? It's looking that way.
It's so glaringly obvious.
Look what he did to this Bucs organization in 1 year. I don't care if the talent was there or not, because Winston had that talent, and look where they
took
finished.
a 7-win team to an 11-win team in a franchise that hadn't been in the playoffs since 2007. And what happened to your team, by the way, when you left? They nosedived. It's all about TB12, and I'm happy to see it.
Well,
because you do it again next year.
Yes.
I agree. Moving on. Number 7. Lucky number 7, Ryan Tannehill.
This guy shocked the world.
Russell Wilson was my starting quarterback in our league of record, John. You know that. And Ryan Tannehill won me a fantasy championship. Does that make sense? Maybe not, but I'll explain. In the last round of our Keeper League draft last year, I drafted Ryan Tannehill. He was literally all that was left. If I told you I was excited about this, I can assure you that would be a lie. Do you remember what happened to me when I drafted this guy, John, last year? What was the reaction?
You were like, ugh.
No, I got laughed at. You don't remember
that?
No,
you got laughed at.
But look, literally everybody laughed at me when I drafted
But he
Ryan
was a
Tannehill.
bargain where you got him. He was a bargain.
He was coming. The problem was he was coming off a year with such high efficiency that we all expected a huge downfall from him. And then in 2020, let's just say it played out a little bit different, and it played a lot more than it did the way we thought, and then it actually did play out in 2019. I know that makes sense because my brain just stopped working for a second there. But 2019 and 2020 looked eerily similar to me as far as Ryan Tannehill was concerned. In a lot of ways, it actually got better. In 2019, Ryan Tannehill averaged 18.7 points per game. Tanny saw an increase to 21.5 in 2020, so his average went up, points per game. In 2019, Tannehill threw a touchdown on 10.94% of his completions. In 2020, that touchdown percentage that we thought was going to drop precipitously, 10.47. And that percentage was actually on a bigger sample size of 114 more completions than last year. In 2019, Tannehill scored 0.25 rushing touchdowns a game. In 2020, he scored 0.44 rushing touchdowns a game, nearly doubling that stat. I think it's time we admit that Adam Gase was the problem, not Ryan Tannehill. There is some concern if Corey Davis leaves in free agency, but at the same time, Tennessee still has yet to tap into the ability of Jonnu Smith, and of course A.J. Brown's still there, and maybe more important, Derrick Henry will still be around to help the cause for old, as I like to call them, Tanny touchdowns. And like I said, John, Tannehill won me a championship. I had a tough decision in Week 15 with a trip to the championship round on the line. Tannehill or Wilson? I went with Tannehill, which was a difference of 29.8 points between the two of them. That continued me on the road to Fantasy Valhalla, and I will forever be grateful to my boy Tanny touchdowns for that very feat.
Yeah, Tannehill had a great match.
Believe it now.
Yeah, Tannehill had a great matchup, and I don't see Tannehill's numbers really going down here. Even with the loss of Corey Davis, Adam Humphries barely played this year, so he'll be back. If you lose to Corey Davis, and Corey Davis had a great season, I do not want to sell him short. He had a great season, but remember, free agency, the draft. These guys could add a receiver through free